Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where your Pitt beat writers Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson answering your questions every Tuesday here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of these Tuesday episodes, as well as the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast and the daily content that comes out here from our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, we take your questions via email and Twitter. We got all emails this week. Getting into some things here. We have transfer portal action has opened up for Pitt football. Pitt basketball plays its last non-conference game before it starts its full slate of ACC scheduled games. And the college football playoffs are underway. We got questions about all those different things. So, Stephen, let's get right to it. Hayden asks, getting into the transfer portal news that we do know about Pitt football right now. Desmond Reid announced he was returning to Pitt. Where do they stand as far as keeping their top guys? Now, Stephen, we listed out top 10 guys for them to consider. Desmond Reid was our number 2 guy on that list. Number 1 was Eli Holstein. 3 was Kyle Lewis. 4, Braylon Lovelace. 5, Rasheem Biles. 6, Jimmy Scott. 7, Lyndon Cooper. 8, Kenny Johnson. 9, BJ Williams. And 10, Sean Fitzsimmons. Now, we don't know about too many of those top guys, but we have seen some guys like Jahsir Whittington commit to sticking around Pitt. Where do you think they stand after being able to keep Desmond Reid?
Seems like they're in pretty good spot, quite honestly. So of those top 10, I mean, you're really only looking for those 3 linebackers that we mentioned. But, Jimmy Scott, Lyndon Cooper, and BJ Williams have all announced that they're going to come back. I feel like they're off to a good start. This is still kind of a work in progress. I mean, Eli Holstein, I think, is the big fish, the one that you really can't afford to lose, especially after Nate Yarnell hits the transfer portal. But I think also the fact that Yarnell decided to hit the transfer portal is a pretty decent sign that Holstein is planning on sticking around. I don't think Yarnell would have left if he had known that there was a possibility that he would have a chance to start. And if Holstein's coming back, he probably doesn't. So they seem to be in pretty good shape there. I think the other thing is you want to get Kyle Lewis back. He seems like a kid that wants to stay in Pittsburgh, but he's going to get some offers. So you got to be on top of that. And I think the biggest thing, though, was retaining both Lyndon Cooper and BJ Williams, arguably your 2 best offensive linemen. You also got Ryan Baer coming back for another year. So it was a lot of good news for Pitt over the past few weeks. Don't feel like they've lost a ton to the transfer portal just yet, but you got to close the deal with some of those guys as well. And most of the holes, I think, remain on the defensive side of the ball right now.
Yeah, certainly there's holes to fill there, but I wonder how much it weighs upon some of these Pitt athletes' minds about what happened to the guys who did transfer last year and the guys who stayed. Kyle Lewis became a second-team All-American in a lot of lists, and he's getting those nods in a lot of different places. Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace, even Brandon George, who came back from the transfer portal, all of them had pretty solid seasons at linebacker. And meanwhile, Dayon Hayes, he's back in the transfer portal. Solomon DeShields, didn't do too good, but Bengali Kamara, I forget the other one, Sam Okunlola, all 4 of those guys, big defensive names that were considered major losses for Pitt. And none of them really had a better year than any of Pitt's top linebackers. And I wonder how much that weighs on some of their decisions. Hey, maybe the grass isn't as green on the other side, but we know where certainly Pitt's going to have to compete again is the money part of things. And just I wonder where the threshold is for some of these kids as far as making their decision to stay or go.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that the outside of Holstein and Reed, who transferred in this year, I mean, these guys kind of understand Pitt's NIL situation. These are guys who chose to stick with Pitt through this past offseason, knowing what their NIL situation is. And I have a hard time believing that Pitt's NIL situation got worse since then. So I think Pitt should be able to retain these guys. I don't think the price tag on many of them outside of Lewis and Holstein increased over the past year. So I would feel pretty confident that of our top 10, I don't think Pitt's lost one of them yet, but I think Pitt's going to be able to keep all of these guys, if not the vast majority of them, going into 2025.
Certainly good news for Pitt football on that front. Let's flip to Pitt basketball, where they are 9-2 with one final game against Sam Houston this Saturday, 1 p.m. at Peterson Event Center to finish out their non-conference schedule. But in this last game, Brandin Cummings went off for 30 points, most points scored by a freshman coming off the bench in a game in program history. And now a lot of people are asking, with the injury to Damian Dunn and Pitt struggle to find that 5th guy to permanently fit on the floor, to be that third ball handler that Jeff Capel wants. Dustin asks via email, did Brandin Cummings do enough to earn a starting role for Jeff Capel? And while that's not a question that I guess you and I can answer definitively, Lee can answer from our perspective. Stephen, would you be giving a nod here to Brandin Cummings as a starter, or would you still want him to be that maybe become that sixth man of the year that Pitt has won 2 years in a row?
Yeah, it's an interesting question just because of how much I think Pitt has struggled to shoot to start this year. For as well as they played at times, 3-point shooting has not necessarily been its strength. And Cummings,
Right.
I think he made 6 of 7 threes on that was last Wednesday night. So it's a valuable asset. It's something to consider. But Zach Austin is shooting a career high 40%, I think 40 and some change from 3 this year. So he's added a bit of a scoring punch as well, while also being a really great rebounder, which Pitt has needed some help with as of late, and playing good on ball and help side defense. So while I think Cummings has maybe played well enough to be considered for a starting job, Zach Austin, I think, has a stranglehold on that role right now, at least until Damian Dunn comes back, and maybe even longer than that. Really depends on what Pitt feels like it needs going into that Cal game, or whenever Dunn actually does end up coming back. I would say Zach Austin is probably more likely to continue to start. He started the past 2 games, and while Cummings was really electric in that win over Eastern Kentucky, I don't think you take out Austin, who's playing really well right now and in a really good groove and doing a lot of different things for Pitt that they really need. I don't think you can afford to take him out of the lineup just yet.
Yeah, I think Zach Austin's been a phenomenal player for Pitt that, that you wrote about in a great feature. He's a glue guy. He pieces everything together. He gets you, he can help you he can attack the rim. He can help you in that he can shoot. And he's a very willing and athletic defender who at 6'7" can keep up with the quick guys and, do a little bit of work against the big guys. So that glue piece is tough to erase. But I like you said, Brandin Cummings' shooting ability is going to be taken advantage of more often, I think, very soon by Pitt. He might become. Here's my thing: is that when Damian Dunn gets back, I do think it's going to be interesting to see the rotation that Pitt has, because it may be, hey, Dunn's back in at the starter. You keep Cam at the 5, Guillermo at the 4. We'll get to him in a second. Dame at the 3, and then Jalen at the 1-ish at the 2. But then maybe you just have as your immediate rotation, after that first media timeout, you sub in Zach, you sub in Brandin, and it gets you a different pace of how you attack. I think that's one thing that Pitt does have going for it this year, is it might actually have some real depth at both ends of the front and the back court that it could rely upon.
Yeah. And I still think at the end of the day, either of these guys are going to get pushed out of the starting lineup again when Damian Dunn comes back in. I think Dunn was, maybe he takes a minute to get his legs back underneath him, but I still think that Dunn is probably your best option to be that 5th starter, while Austin goes back to the bench. And he was playing really well there. He's played well both as a starter and a reserve, but I think this will be a short-term solution anyway, whether they go with Cummings or Austin, or even, go back to Amsel Delilich like they were for that Ohio State game and that Mississippi State game.
Absolutely. Let's get moving here. Roy asked a question about Guillermo Diaz Graham. Seeing Guillermo Diaz Graham has had a rough stretch of games here. How long is his leash for Jeff Capel to keep him as a starter? Now, Steven, we were at that game, and he gave a pretty staunch defense of Guillermo Diaz Graham after Pitt's 40-point win last week, where Guillermo didn't shoot well from 3, had about 4 turnovers, got some groans from a sparsely attended game in the Pitt crowd that was there. Steven, I get the sense that, Jeff Capel talked about how this guy is the heart of the team. His energy is vital. He's been there, for 3 years. I get all those points, but at some point you do need to it's fine if Guillermo can't hit the 3-pointer. It's not fine. You need him to hit the 3-pointer to be an effective part of this offense. But if he can just cut down on the turnovers and just be a little bit quicker on defense, I think that most of these problems won't be highlighted as much, because that's where I see him being the biggest liability to Pitt right now, where his shooting can improve. If he improves those things, I think it won't hurt Pitt as much when he's on the floor.
Right. And what Jeff Capel told us was, he's done some really good defensive things for them. He's statistically, I think, at least in terms of offensive and defensive rebound rate, their second best rebounder outside of, I think, Ish Leggett is probably the one who leads in those statistical categories for Pitt. But I I agree with you. The eye test has not been pretty. It's not been kind to Guillermo Diaz Graham, but I think the coaches and the team values what he does a lot more, and they believe that he's during his time at Pitt. It's kind of buoyed by what he did last year when he was a 40+% 3-point shooter. But he's entering this year, he was a 37% career 3-point shooter. That's pretty good. That's above average. I think that's well above average in terms of what you see in the rest of Division One. So I believe that the team is counting on a bit of a regression to the mean for him, he's going to find his shot a little bit better, that he's going to adjust to the different coverages and attention that he's getting now. And once the 3-point shot, starts going down, that'll open up a lot of different things for him and for the rest of the team. The turnovers look bad, but honestly, for a big man in the ACC, his turnover rate isn't that abnormal from some of the other guys that you see. I think there's also some truth to the idea that because he is shooting poorly, he's putting the ball on the floor a little bit more, and that's going to lead to more turnovers as a bigger guy. So I think it's more about him sticking to what he's good at, trying to pick his spots a little bit more. But he's rebounded well. I think he's done some decent stuff defensively. So I think that this leash is still pretty long. I think he's going to stay in the starting lineup, through the end of the year, quite honestly, unless these struggles really start to persist. But it was pretty clear after that Eastern Kentucky game that Jeff Capel believes in him, that they're not going to kind of shy away from letting him go out there and work through these mistakes, counting on the fact that he's going to return to being the player that he was in spots last year, and that kind of the new role that they have for him is the better fit for him.
I think you make a really good point about if he hits the shots, he puts the ball on the floor less, and it leads to some of those less turnovers. Sometimes he is just driving into traffic, and teams are looking to strip him. And listen, it's not about, oh, he's so bad. It's when you're 7 foot tall and you try to drive, it is a very difficult thing because that ball's got to bounce a lot farther than it does when you're 6'3" or 6'5" even. So that's part of the challenge. But to looking at that challenge, in his first 6 games, Guillermo had 2 turnovers in 6 games. 2 of those were against power conference opponents, and he still fared well in those. He's had 9 turnovers in the last 2 games, one of those being the Virginia Tech one and the other one being the blowout over Eastern Kentucky. I think if he shores those up, gets that better, keeps bringing the defense that he did. I think he did a really good job defending late against Virginia Tech. If he can do that more, I do think the shots will come. He shot 2 out of 24 from 3-point range, and dating back to the LSU game, since they started that away stretch there before they got back to Eastern Kentucky, and then including the Eastern Kentucky game. But I do think, like you're saying, the regression to the mean can happen there. Shooting usually averages itself out. But if Pitt can get him to do that, limit the turnovers, and he is the team's leading rebounder. While you said that, I went and checked. He now has 6.4 to Ishmael's 6.2. But if he can do those things and improve in rebounding, that'll be enough. Pitt doesn't need to be a star; they need him to be a good role player.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like they're going to put a ton on his plate or add to his plate at all. But Diaz Graham, I think he's pushing a little bit, pressing a little bit as the shots have stopped to fall. And once he's able to fit back into a niche, I think things will kind of level out for him.
Absolutely. Let's get to this last question here from Doug via email. I know you guys cover Pitt, but who are your 2 teams to make the final in the college football playoffs? And Steven, this is fun. I love bracketology in basketball. I love just picking random teams and just going over and saying, oh, I think this team's got this. I think this team's got that. And it's the first time we get to really do that for college football with the 12-team playoff. So instead of just us saying our championship teams, let's go game by game. You and me pick them side by side, and we see how this goes here. Let's start with Clemson at Texas, December 21st, 4 p.m. kickoff. I think this is going to be a really good game, but I'm going to take the Longhorns here. They've been pretty good all season. I think if Clemson matched up with Tennessee or Ohio State or Penn State or Notre Dame or Indiana, any other teams, that didn't get a bye, I think they would have won this game. But Texas, I think, is just too good.
I would go the other way. I think Clemson's going to win this one. I think that Quinn Ewers is liable to make a couple of bad mistakes, and Clemson's defense is as good as it's always been under Dabo Swinney. So I think, Kade Klubnik's going to take care of the ball. Clemson's running game is going to be able to control the game a little bit and not put as much on Klubnik. So I think they're just going to make that one more play that they need. The defenses are going to dominate, but I think Clemson comes out with a win there.
Tennessee at Ohio State. Ohio State kind of backed its way in with the way it finished. I like Tennessee. I've liked the Volunteers all season. I think they're a pretty good team. I think they're going to lay a whooping on Ohio State.
This is interesting, man, because I don't like Ohio State, but I really don't like Tennessee. I liked Tennessee for a while, but I just think Nico Imaleava is just kind of needs a little bit more seasoning before he can become a quarterback that's able to contend with, kind of the big boys like that. So I would pick Tennessee. I'd pick Ohio State in this game, but I don't feel particularly good about it. I think this could go either way. I just think Ohio State's defense is going to be able to control things a little bit better.
SMU at Penn State, the 11 versus the 6. I think this could be the ultimate upset alert here, though. You picked the 12 seed to beat the 5 seed, so you already got an ultimate upset alert there. I got SMU. I think they're big, they're fast. I think they will be a problem for Penn State, and I think that their defense will do enough to limit what the Lions do on offense. Give me SMU in the upset here. What say you, Stephen? Are we going to split every single game?
I think we might, because I really think that Penn State has not been particularly impressive to me. Outside of that Big Ten championship game performance, which was actually very impressive against what I think's been far away the best team in the country all season long, Oregon. And I question James Franklin's ability to win big games very plainly. I mean, he hasn't won very many in his time at Penn State. I think one of his most impressive wins came off of a blocked field goal. So, I question it, for all season long. I've, kind of heard that it is James Franklin's destiny to lose a first round playoff game, but I don't think it's going to happen this time. I just think Penn State's going to be able to lay on SMU. It's not because SMU doesn't have the athletes to keep up with them, but that defense for Penn State is just way too good. And whiteout environment in Beaver Stadium, I think that's really going to play to their favor. And while I think SMU, I see the path to them winning this game, I don't think it's going to happen this time.
Man, all right. Indiana at Notre Dame. I'm taking the Hoosiers. Please don't tell me you're taking the Irish. We're going to completely split that. Dang it, Steven, we're doing this.
I want to pick Indiana. I think they're fun. I like their story. I think Kurt Cignetti is a good coach, but I really like Notre Dame. I love the way that their offensive defensive line plays. I think that's going to carry them actually pretty far in this tournament, to be quite honest. Notre Dame's just been kind of looming in the background, not doing too much, not ruffling too many feathers since that loss to Northern Illinois. And I think it's going to be a very workman-like victory for the Irish at home.
All right. So despite the fact that we picked completely different in every single pick, we'll try to do this next round here. So I guess, okay, you picked Clemson. So automatically they would play Oregon, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd take Oregon. I think Oregon's going to win it all. So I would have Oregon against either Texas or Clemson in that game.
Okay. So, all right, then we're both on the same page there. I'm taking Oregon to win that game. I think in my situation, SMU technically would go to them unless I don't know. Do they reseed based off of rent? Oh, they don't reseed. Okay, so that makes this a lot easier. Never mind. All right, so that would mean Clemson and Texas. So you would have Clemson versus Arizona State first before we get to Oregon here. I would have Texas versus Arizona State. I actually would have Texas beating Arizona State. I have them losing to Oregon in the semifinals. That's where I have Texas going in this bracket.
I think I would have Arizona State losing that one too. I would pick Clemson in that one now.
Okay, so we're both on the same page there, and then I assume we're both. I picked Tennessee, you picked Ohio State, but both of us having them lose to Oregon to get to the semifinals, and then Oregon beating Clemson or Texas in the semifinals to get to the final game.
Yes, I would pick that too.
All right, so that makes that easy. All right, then Boise State, Penn State for you, Boise State, SMU for me. I love Ashton Jeanty. I don't think he got robbed from the Heisman. I think Travis Hunter deserved it, but I think Boise State, they've been waiting for this moment since they missed that field goal way back in, what was that, like 2008 or some nonsense. I think they come in, they deliver, they beat SMU. I also think that they would beat Penn State, but what say you here, Steven?
I think they would beat SMU. I don't think they would beat Penn State. I just don't think they have the vertical passing game to open enough stuff up for GT. But in my scenario, I would have Penn State moving on in that one.
So you have Penn State going to the championship or the semifinals, excuse me. You have Notre Dame playing Georgia. I have Indiana. I think both of us are probably going to pick Georgia here to win this game, unless you got Notre Dame beating Georgia.
I've not been impressed with Georgia, man. Like, I don't think Carson Beck really has it. I think they were kind of lucky to win that game against the SEC championship game against Texas. I'd pick Notre Dame to go and to advance in that one.
Steven has Notre Dame in the Final Four here. The Final Four here. He must have been watching Rudy all weekend before the show. All right. So that means you got Notre Dame up against Penn State. Now that's some old school classic football. I would have Georgia beating Boise State going to the title game. I know I'm doing a lot of chalk here. 1 versus 2, Oregon versus Georgia here. But you got Penn State versus Notre Dame. Who makes the final to meet Oregon?
I think I have to go with Notre Dame. I kind of like this. I think
this
in a year,
craziest bracket ever.
I think, well, that's what this is supposed to be about. You know, that kind of happens when you expand to 12 teams. But I think, like I said at the top, I like the way Notre Dame plays up front. I think their lines are going to travel and are better than anyone that they're going to see on this side of the bracket. It will be an ugly game. I think the defenses would dominate in that one, but I would trust Penn State, kind of controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides against Penn State, making Drew Aller uncomfortable, holding that running game in check, and advancing in a real ugly game to play Oregon in the national championship.
Man. All right. Well, then I guess you got Notre Dame, Oregon. I got Georgia, Oregon. Oh, man. I'm sticking with the Ducks. I like the way that they've played this year. So we both got – so after all that madness, we both got Oregon winning it all.
Both picked the team that's been number one since they beat Ohio State. I think they became
like
the number one
week
team.
5 or some stuff.
Yeah, it was real early. But yeah, I think ever since that happened, Oregon's been number one, and I've rode with them the entire way. I think they're going to win the national championship.
Well, there you have it, Doug. You got us to talk through our entire brackets. Let's see if who's right, who's wrong. That all starts this weekend, as does Pitt basketball's game against Sam Houston. We'll have you covered all week long leading up to that, as well as all the transfer portal updates. Get all of that at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel or on your favorite podcasting app to get our Tuesday mailbag episodes and the daily content that comes up from all of our Pittsburgh Post-Gazette sports writers. From Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson, we'll see you again here real soon. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.